Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Sabrina Kofer, and on behalf of Choice and ACRL, I'd like to welcome you to today's program, AI for Libraries, Advancing Research and Discovery, which is sponsored by Clarivate. This session is one in a series of sponsored webinars from Choice and ACRL that addresses new ideas and developments of interest to the academic library community. Now I'll just put a couple links in the chat where you can register for upcoming Choice webinars or watch previous webinar recordings. Also, if you're interested in library technology, LibTech Insights, or LTI, is a content vertical from Choice that examines the day-to-day impact of library and education technology on academic librarianship and higher education. The channel provides practical guidance on technology trends and products as they relate to productivity, accessibility, content management, and more. You can find out more about LTI and sign up for the newsletter via the links in the chat. Before we get started, I'd like to point out just a few features of the webinar software. All attendees who join the presentation are automatically muted and your cameras are off, so don't worry about generating any noise or feedback. We got that taken care of for you. In the main area of the screen, you can follow along with the presentation materials. To adjust the size of the slides or video, you can use the divider in the middle of the screen to slide the sizes to your liking. We are using the Q&A feature today. Please use it to ask questions of our speakers or to share any comments. We do anticipate many questions, so if we don't get to yours, we apologize for that, but we'll do our best to answer as many questions as we have time for at the end of the presentation. So please do type your questions into the Q&A module as they occur to you. You can also use the upvote feature to highlight questions you like or would like to be addressed. Also, there is closed captioning available for today's session. To toggle the automated captions on or off, please use the CC button on the bottom of your screen. Last, please note that we are recording today's program and everyone who registered should receive a follow-up email with a link to the archive version and where to access today's slides. And with that, we're ready to get started, so I will hand it over to Fran.
Thanks so much, Sabrina. Welcome to today's session, everyone. We're going to be talking today about AI for libraries. Just to give you a quick introduction, I'm Francesca Buckland, Vice President of Product Management here at Clarivate. And we have a packed agenda. I'm going to be talking a little bit about AI for academic research and some of the things that we've found listening to the academic community so far within Clarivate. We've got Juan Denzer from Syracuse University joining us today, and he's going to share some of his insights in how he's using AI and thinking about AI at Syracuse. We've got a section on academic AI at Clarivate and what we're doing internally to build and use academic AI. And then my colleague Philip Ryman is going to be doing a bit of a section on the Web of Science Research Assistant, a new tool from Clarivate, and he's going to be doing a demo as well. And as Sabrina mentioned, we've got a Q&A at the end, so please do feel free to ask questions as we're going through the content today. Upvote your favorite questions, and we will do our best to answer them at the end of the session. So without further ado, let's get into the content. So AI is everywhere, changes everywhere. We're living in an era of rapid changes. Across higher education, what we're seeing is librarians, research managers, researchers, and students having to adapt to huge shifts over the past few years. We all know there's pressure to deliver results amid a whole ton of challenges, such as digital transformation, which has been around for a little while now. There's a rise in predatory publishing. There's trends towards open access and open science. We know a lot of customers of ours and a lot in the community are facing budget constraints and things like socio-political dynamics on top of that. And then there's AI, and that's really transforming every aspect of academia. It's reshaping how we work, how we learn, how we teach, and how we see research being conducted. And so for us, we think the future of academia really depends on our ability to navigate these challenges while still kind of upholding the core principles of research and of education. So we're going to launch a quick poll now. We'd love to hear a little bit from you just to kick us off. Where does your library stand in terms of implementing AI tools? So have you, you're not actively pursuing any AI at the moment, or are you in the middle of implementing AI tools? Hopefully you see the poll. If you can let us know, what you're thinking, where you are in the progress of implementing AI in your library. We'll leave the poll open for a couple of seconds. Just really nice to know whereabouts you are as an audience. Great, thank you. And great, yeah, really interesting to see those responses. So thank you everyone who participated. So you can see a lot of people, most people in early discussions or investigating and evaluating tools. So hopefully this is going to be really helpful. We're going to talk about a little bit about Juan's experience actively investigating and evaluating tools. So hopefully this is going to be helpful for you today. Great. So we will move on then. So there's, the quickening pace of technological advancement, in particular with generative artificial intelligence, which we'll refer to throughout this presentation as Gen AI, is reshaping the academic landscape and the landscape for all, really. And as you might have seen, Clarivate recently published our Pulse of the Library report, which combines feedback from a survey and qualitative interviews with more than 1,500 respondents from across the world, covering academic, national, and public libraries. The link is in the chat, so if you want to go and check that out, please do. But it aims really to provide a pulse on the current trends, looking at concerns and opportunities within the library community. And it has a particular focus on technological change, including AI. And it was really interesting, that report. What we actually found, one key finding of the report is that most libraries either have an AI plan or one in the works. So, over 60% of respondents are evaluating or planning for AI integration. And that actually very closely mirrors, I think, the feedback from the poll that we saw earlier. So thank you for participating in that. So very similar results there. Our results also showed that AI adoption is a top priority for libraries. So around 43% of respondents saying, that implementing AI-powered tools for their users tops a list of tech priorities for the next year. So really, really important. And we know people in the community and in the librarian community are thinking about this a huge amount. So as we mentioned, we know it's a big focus area. And as we at Clarivate started to consider the opportunities that AI represents for academic research, we were also very aware of the challenges and the risks that it represents. And we know, with our role as part of the academic community, providing those tools, we know that the way we design and apply AI into our products at Clarivate is really, really important. And so we're really focused on providing trusted solutions in a transparent way and doing so responsibly with the academic community. So what we started off with was to develop a really strong set of AI principles, and we did this with really close collaboration with the research community. And these are central to the development of our research tools and every innovation that we're building at Clarivate. So to ensure that we're continuing to meet the demands of modern research and address really valid concerns about the use of AI in academia, the way we've worked is to partner with librarians and researchers around the world during the product development process. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that with Juan and with Phil over the course of this session as well. We remain absolutely committed to these principles, keeping research and learning integrity at the heart of everything that we do. And these structures, the community feedback that I'm talking about, allow us to receive absolutely critical feedback that we need in order to ensure that our products are developed in ways that are both valuable and also aligned with academic values. And it helps us to adhere really to ethical AI principles. So we know that the challenges exist, and if you think about some of those types of challenges that you might find with generative AI when you're specifically looking at research and academic use cases, one of the problems that the kind of challenges that might come up is that general Gen AI tools like, for example, ChatGPT and others don't provide necessarily citations or trusted content. But unlike that, we've been really focused on making sure that we provide users with trusted content that's based on curated academic material. Now, that can't ensure fully against errors, but what we've done, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in future slides, is we're continuously evaluating, testing, and validating the results that we get through our academic and our AI, academic AI, to carefully minimize those risks. The other way is that we're working so closely with researchers and librarians to identify new ways that Gen AI can be applied to solve different challenges for both students and researchers today. And that's really exciting. I think one of the things that we're doing at Clarivate, we like to talk a little bit about flipping the script on AI with products like Alethea and the Web of Science Research Assistant. When we talk about flipping the script, what we're often talking about is thinking about new ways that generative AI can be used, rather than, for example, to give somebody an answer or to write an essay for them. It's to be able to help them better understand course material or to help them get more out of a literature review on the Web of Science. So really thinking about transforming the way that Gen AI is used, so as to really get the best out of that learning or that research experience. And finally, we collaborate with publishers. We have really, really clear definitions of user permissions so that we can make sure we provide the best experience to users and also to publishers, of the content that we're using in the Web of Science. So before we go on to the next section, which is talking about some insights for librarians, and we're going to hear from Juan, we'd love to hear from you again with a poll. So I'd love to hear about which types of AI-powered solution that you're focused on. So whether you're thinking about tools for your students, for your researchers, whether you're thinking more about tools internally used in the library, so the management system or collection development, or to help support the digital preservation schemes and technology, or any other types of use cases. Really great to hear from you about the types of AI that you're looking at integrating into the library. Great. Okay. And we can see the results of that poll now. So it looks like most people are looking at the AI tools for students and researchers, so providing support through for learning and for research through AI, but also quite a few have mentioned about other kind of use cases. So looking at, as I mentioned, library management systems and collection developments, as well as other use cases. So thank you very much. That's really useful. And we're going to be talking a lot about the AI tool in the Web of Science, which is obviously based for students and researchers throughout the rest of the session. So again, hopefully that will be useful to you as well. So next, I'd love to introduce Juan. And Juan, do you want to talk a little bit about yourself?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Fran. So a little bit about myself. I am the Engineering and Computer Science Librarian at Syracuse University. And I do want to just make sure that everybody knows that I do not work for Clarivate in any way, but I do like talking to vendors as well as my colleagues and faculty and students about AI. So again, as being the Engineering and Computer Science Librarian, I am the liaison to the department. So a lot of what I do is interacting with faculty and students and looking for ways to help them with their research, not just gathering research materials, but also evaluating tools that we have, whether it's databases or any type of citation tools. And I also work with my colleagues across the libraries outside of Syracuse and also within Syracuse. And we do a lot of presentations and things like that. So that's just a little bit about me, how I'm invested in AI.
Great, thanks, Juan. So I'm going to ask you a little bit, a few questions about how you're thinking about AI over the course of the next few slides. So the first one is, how are you thinking about the risks and the rewards of using AI technologies for academic research?
Yes, thank you. That's a great question. So the way I think about risks and rewards when using AI technologies in academic research, it's the same way we've been looking at the risks and rewards of other technologies within libraries we've used. So if you think about the early days of the internet and the way people thought about how that's going to change the landscape, or what's the risk behind it or rewards behind it, whether it's through academic integrity, whether they're going to be useful, if they're cost effective. These are all things that you just continue thinking about with AI. I often think about it as just another tool, whether it's another type of database, the internet. I know the big thing that used to be several years ago was Wikipedia, and people were kind of like thinking, oh, how is that going to change us? We look at it the same way. That's the way I look at risks and rewards, the same way.
Great, thank you so much. And what's your assessment of the AI landscape that researchers are encountering today?
So I think a lot of what researchers are encountering with AI really falls on credibility and ethics, as well as like data security, privacy. I think those are the bigger things that they're encountering. They're also encountering whether these tools are really going to be effective in giving back their time, right? So if they're really going to be useful to cut down their time so they can do more research. I think those are the things that they're really encountering, is whether it's going to be useful, if I'm going to have credible information, is it going to protect my data? Those are the really key things that I think they're really focusing on. And one of the things that often doesn't get discussed, and oftentimes I will have faculty members ask me, is really about equity and inclusion with AI, like how much of it is going to be available to every researcher. And I think that moving forward is a big issue, especially with these third-party type products that are being developed by like OpenAI, Microsoft, Google has some, and then there's others like Perplexity that are, how much of that is going to be available for all? So I think those are the things that they're encountering in this landscape.
Great, thank you. That's a really useful answer. So moving on, you've obviously evaluated quite a few of these tools already. So what are the types of kind of key considerations that you use when you're evaluating the suitability of these types of tools for researchers?
Yeah, so when evaluating the suitability for these AI tools for researchers, one of the big things that I really try to focus on, which I think is important, is to ensure that these products are not radically changing the way they they do their research, right? So there's a lot of tools, like a good example is Perplexity AI, which tries to incorporate the Google type of search within their searching, and offering a lot of like extra information, some even adding like ads and stuff like that. So for me, the biggest thing is having these tools that are really simplified, but also continuing that level of research that researchers have known they know how to do, right? This is how librarians kind of like early on start them with their research and say, okay, this is how you do proper academic research. So for me, it's really important to make sure that these tools aren't changing that. The other thing that's important, and I think it's important for especially faculty and their students, is that these tools do not replace critical thinking. So a lot of these tools make these big promises to where it just magically gives you what you want, and then you don't have to do any research. And that's what's important, that you still have to do a level of research that goes beyond the AI. So those, when I'm evaluating those tools. And then just briefly, other things that are really important is to ensure that the information is credible. That's a key thing. And then data privacy, like all the data that's being collected, is it being trained by that AI? Those are all things that I think about. And also, I do think about who is funding these products or what companies are using it. And I think that's really important, especially when there's these bigger companies like Microsoft and Google that are trying to, move their way into academics and develop these tools, I think it's important to know who's developing, where is, as they say, where is the funding coming from, or who are the ones that are providing it? So I think that's a key thing to think about.
Absolutely. Thank you. Really, really useful insights there. And finally, last question. So what has been your approach to ensuring that researchers are well equipped to implement AI tools that add value, true value to their process?
Yeah, so great question. So my approach here at Syracuse, and this is not just my approach, this is the approach that me and my colleagues, especially colleagues that I work together with, developing this way to educate faculty and students so they're kind of well prepared. So our approach obviously starts with evaluating a lot of these tools, evaluating them, whether it's new tools that are being developed, getting into some beta program or beta access to see how they work. I will reach out to other vendors, like, for instance, I talked to the R&D that develops a product called Kenios and talk to them about their products. And then what we do is we discuss it among ourselves and then share it with faculty. And we offer things like workshops. So we're really big on giving workshops on these tools, whether it's how to cite these tools. We'll give a workshop on citation. We will have faculty members ask us to give library instruction sessions, which are fully dedicated to AI. I have one coming up with a colleague of mine next week, where we will discuss these products and how they can be used in your classroom. The other thing that I think is really important too, and I'm going to share this in the chat, is my colleague and I, we've developed a research guide, which it's Artificial Intelligence Research Guide. And this lists like all useful information for our faculty and students to learn about these up and coming products, things that we might have access to, might not have access to, everything from equity, privacy, credibility, all of those things are included in these research guides. So that is kind of my approach and our approach here to getting kind of like help our faculty and students be well equipped with using these tools, because a lot of them really don't know what's going on. And I think it's important that librarians have the ability to gather all this information and share it with everybody.
Great, thank you so much. That's really insightful, and thank you for sharing that that research guide as well. That's really helpful. Juan's going to be joining us in the Q&A later, so if you do have any follow-up questions that you want to ask about the processes and evaluations that he's been adopting at Syracuse, please do pop those in the chat as well, and hopefully we'll get round to answering some of those later. But for now, we're going to be moving on now. I'm going to be talking a little bit about what we're doing with academic AI at Clarivate. But before we go into that section, we'd love to hear from you again with another poll. So how do you feel about the impact of AI on libraries over the next few years? So just kind of getting a bit of a temperature check. Is everyone really, really positive, kind of seeing all the benefits that are gonna happen with libraries, with researchers? Are you cautiously optimistic? Are you slightly concerned about some of the challenges? Or are you very, very concerned and convinced that there are going to be huge negative effects? So if you want to cast a vote now, that would be great. Fantastic. Okay, great. So that's nice to see in the room. There's a lot of cautious optimism. I think that's definitely how we're feeling about this at Clarivate too. You know, there are definitely challenges and we want to acknowledge those, but I think there's also a huge amount of potential with some of these types of technologies. So good to see that's over 50% of you also feel the same way about the impact of AI. So thank you very much for answering that question. Right, we're now going to move on. I want to talk a little bit about how we're approaching AI at Clarivate, and we're really thinking about this with a couple of goals in mind. The first one is thinking about adding AI into our existing solutions. So that's, you know, doing similar things to the way we've done things in the past, but just doing them better thanks to AI. And there's a couple of good examples of this on Web of Science. We have enriched cited references, which classifies references into the type of citation, like whether it's supporting or differing research. We also, enabling more kind of natural language querying across all the products. A lot of the products that are based on search, Web of Science, and others have adopted more natural language search in the recent past. So that's one type of thing that we're looking at doing. The second one is kind of transformation with AI, and this is the kind of exciting, the big opportunities, creating new services and applications that we either kind of didn't or couldn't do before. And we've really seen kind of AI unlocking new and innovative ways to discover kind of themes and connections throughout our data, enabling us to solve real world problems in new ways, uncover new problems and help solve them as well. And the third way is really important as well. So we're also looking at AI as a way to increase efficiencies. And this applies both to increasing customer efficiencies and productivity, so helping you all become more efficient, more productive, as well as improving our own back-end processes within Clarivate. And a really good example of this is using AI to enrich metadata more consistently and at scale. And in order to meet all of these opportunities, there's a huge amount of opportunity out there we can see across all of the academic portfolio. What we've done is developed this academic AI platform. And this academic AI platform combines a backbone of core AI capabilities, for example, conversational discovery, so those kind of search, visualization, and also analytics, with alongside a center of excellence to provide stewardship around best practice, testing, evaluation, and the responsible use of AI. And what this really helps us do is to develop AI capabilities at scale, and really importantly, in a safe and secure environment that enhances privacy and data security and also optimizes access to LLMs across our customer base and across the product portfolio. And we've been working really closely with our community on this. We've built an AI advisory council who are really good, been sharing insights. They've been evaluating results, giving feedback on our various, the opportunities and the development. And they've also been helping us look at how we can address inaccuracies and bias and share best practices as well. So now we're going to look at the technology in a little bit more detail. And I want to just talk about a few key things. So the first one is in the academic AI, we're not training our own large language model. So we're using pre-trained models. And which model we're choosing is very much dependent on the individual needs on the product side. So we want to make sure we get the best outcomes, the best outputs. We're working with a number of different providers. For example, we're working with OpenAI, but we're also looking at other models. And where we differ from the general purpose large language models and the products that you may already be familiar with is that we are using a technique called retrieval augmented generation, or you might hear it called RAG for short. And what this means is that the knowledge that informs the responses that you get from a product are bound by that product's content. So if that's Web of Science, all you get is Web of Science is an answer based on Web of Science content. ProQuest or eBook Central, the same. You'll only get an answer that's bounded by that product's content. We're not relying on the wider internet or the wider training material to answer questions. What happens is a query is interpreted by the large language model and it's turned into a search that works across the content within the product. And the results of that query, so the answers are then sent back into the large language model, which basically just extracts the information from that content and uses it to formulate a response. And the key benefit of this approach is you can trust the source of the content and you can even see that source itself. So it cites the sources that it's using in order to verify the response in more detail. Phil's going to be demonstrating this further when we look at the Web of Science Research Assistant very shortly. As mentioned previously, we've been working really, really closely with the academic community, and that's been central to our AI product strategy. And so for the Web of Science Research Assistant, our partnership with our development partner community has meant that we could gather feedback and guide our product development, using the feedback from thousands of users at these institutions across the world. We've got a few of them. I know it's quite small to see, but they're here on the screen, as well as Syracuse, who Juan has been speaking on behalf of as well. And those development partners have shaped and optimized the research assistant for academic use cases, and they're continuing now to inform its future development. And I'm going to ask Juan to kind of rejoin us a bit, and if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about why you decided to participate in the development partner program for the Web of Science Research Assistant.
Yes, thank you, Fran. So the reason why I chose to participate is, as I mentioned before, I've done a lot of like beta testing for other products. And often what they do is they just give me access, and they'll give me access to their product, especially from other vendors. And then they'll ask me to give feedback. So what I thought was really important here was we were given the opportunity not only to have me join the beta program and be kind of a feedback partner in part of this team, but it allowed our entire campus to have beta access, which is really unique in the sense that we were given the opportunity for me to have faculty and students try it out and our library staff and give me feedback that I could provide back to them. So I think that was really important. And I will say, for me, personally, anytime there's an opportunity to be included in the conversations with vendors or any other companies developing these products, I think it's really important. And I'll give a really good example. I recently presented at a AI conference online, and one of the presenters was the CEO of a new startup company developing a research product. And as he was going through his pitch, basically, of his new product, he listed all of the people involved. And they were everyone from marketing, software engineers to the CEO and VP. There was nobody there. There were no librarians. There was nobody in academics. So it got me thinking that, are these people even reaching out to people in academics and getting their feedback? So that's why I try to invest in this kind of like push to get access to these tools so I can talk to vendors. So that's why it was a great opportunity with Web of Science and basically any other company that will allow me to like beta test, I think is important.
Great, thank you so much. So I'm now going to hand over to Philip Ryman, who's going to talk a little bit more about Web of Science Research Assistant.
Thank you, Fran, and hi, everybody. It's amazing to see so many people joining us for this particular session, and thank you to everybody that's been submitting comments and questions. We'll do our best to cover them at the end of this brief demonstration of the Web of Science Research Assistant. My name's Phil Ryman. I'm Product Director within the Web of Science product, and I've had the pleasure of leading on the development of this new tool. And I'm going to spend a very brief amount of time just giving you a little bit of context about the Web of Science Research Assistant in that broader infrastructure of the academic AI platform that we've created. And then I'll spend a little bit of time providing a bit of a live demonstration. I can't seem to be able to forward the slides, unfortunately, so if I will instead just share them myself. Apologies for this. Okay, apologies for that slight interruption. So, as we've mentioned, the Web of Science Research Assistant is our generative AI powered tool that we've developed with the intention of helping Web of Science users of all capabilities to get more out of their interactions with the Web of Science core collection content. And I emphasize generative AI powered because my goal really over the course of just the next 10 minutes is to give you a taste of how we've kind of taken the excitement of the technology that is generative AI, but really considered as a product team and in collaboration with our development partners, as Fran was just talking about, to really kind of see how we can package this technology in a way that solves real world problems and actually helps the users of the Web of Science and the kinds of tasks that they come to the Web of Science to perform to actually be able to get more out of that experience without necessarily having to be that accustomed to all of the capabilities that the Web of Science has to offer. So we've talked about generative AI and its capability to help with things like conversational discovery. And that, of course, is becoming increasingly a kind of a baseline expectation of the capabilities of these tools. But when we packaged it and we thought about that way in which users can interact in a much more conversational style, we saw a much more opportunity to be able to enable a user to kind of step by step work their way through the kinds of tasks that they come to the Web of Science to perform. And so we've actually packaged these very assistant-like guides that help a user to break down tasks and for us to be able to present new types of information and new ways of showing that information at points in time that make sense to the user. And I'll provide some demonstration of that as we progress. And as you may have seen, we published a blog about this recently, and it really aims to emphasize how we've taken this technology to really go beyond just the discovery of content, to help users to actually uncover new connections between pieces of information, and to be able to actually help users and showcase our content in ways that can actually help get their tasks done more efficiently and more effectively. So here I am in the Web of Science Research Assistant. For those of you familiar with the Web of Science interface, you can see that the Research Assistant is available in this completely separate environment. And this enables us to be much more expressive and experimental with the types of functionality that this technology can afford us. So you can see here that I've got an open box that I can type any question of my preference. And as I've mentioned, we've got these task-based workflows that will help walk a user through those kinds of tasks that we know users typically come to the Web of Science to perform. So for example, one particular type of use case is to understand a new topic more broadly and more generally. Perhaps you've started a new course at university, perhaps you're undertaking a piece of research into a new area, and you need to understand the fundamentals of that particular course. And we looked at what that means. So typically that means understanding what some of the latest research in that space is, understanding how that topic relates to other concepts within the field, so you can start to understand how that subject is related to other nearby subjects in the same sort of semantic area, through to understanding who are the key researchers in that space. Often when we start a new course, we look for the people that we need to be looking to. We need to know what kinds of bodies of research we need to be exploring. And so step by step, that guided task will walk you through that. Next, we have the literature review guided task, which takes that notion of understanding a topic to a sort of an additional, more detailed level, considering some of the more detailed tasks that a user might need to do in order to conduct a literature review. So here we start predominantly looking at which are the seminal papers in that particular space. And by seminal, we look through the complete depth of the Web of Science core collection and look for those most impactful papers that have yielded the most connections to other papers through their citations to kind of really help you understand the grounding of that particular subject, as well as also understanding what is the latest research and who are the kind of key leaders in that particular field. But the conversational kind of element of this also really lent itself well to another kind of workflow that users very often come to the Web of Science to perform. And that's when they're preparing their own manuscript for publication, they want to be able to find a reputable, trusted journal to which to submit their article to. And a lot of the time, that can be quite an absorbing, time-intensive task, trying to find which is the most appropriate journal to submit my particular field of research to. A lot of submissions often don't result in successful publication for the very reason of submitting to a journal that might not necessarily be the most appropriate. So again, leveraging our content in a very new and novel way, we can actually walk the user through an evaluation of the title of their manuscript and the abstract of their manuscript and present through this chat interface suggestions of the most closely matched articles within the Web of Science core collection for them to publish to. Now, I'm not going to have opportunity in the time that we've got available today to demonstrate all of these workflows. So instead, I'm just going to focus on some of the key capabilities of the types of interaction and questions that you can ask of the Web of Science Research System to showcase its capabilities most comprehensively. And really, there are kind of three broad categories of the types of interaction that you can start with. The first, as we've talked about, is conversational discovery or conversational search. So for many users, this is becoming more and more the natural way in which they're interacting with these kinds of search engines and search databases. So I could take an example here of show me papers on climate change from 2000 with more than 5 citations. So it's very much a document-centric search that I'm posing to the research assistant in a very natural way. And as Fran mentioned earlier, the way in which this tool is working is it's taking that input, interpreting the intent and the types of entities that are being mentioned, and turning that into a Web of Science search. So here it's taken that, understood the types of things that I'm then interested in, and then turn that into a full depth search of the Web of Science core collection, spanning up to 120 years worth of research. And one of the key things, again, as Fran mentioned earlier, around that idea of flipping the script on AI and some of the concerns that researchers and institutions are currently grappling with, is that we want to be as transparent as possible about how this is working, how the results have been generated, and what this tool can actually assist you with. So you can see, just on a basic level, we're very explicit about what that has actually searched and how many results have been generated in total. So here we've got 2,400 odd results. And because I've asked this as a question, but essentially looking for specific documents, it then lists, in our case here, the top 8 of those articles that were returned as the most relevant articles in that particular search structure. And if I'm interested in understanding that paper in more detail, I can click on the article to see more information there. Now, obviously, we want to use this as a platform, not just to ring fence somebody's discovery around those top 8. We know, as we've already stated, that there are a large number of additional documents available in the Web of Science core collection to explore further. So, of course, we always offer the ability to then view that additional full set of results within the very traditional Web of Science search results list, which you can then refine, export, and save that as a search for you to be able to reproduce in the future. Leveraging generative AI, we can then send the information that we hold about those articles back to the large language model and ask for it to provide a very high-level overview or an introduction to each of those research pieces. Now, this is intended to help the user to very quickly understand, is this a piece of research that I might be particularly interested in? Do I want to explore that further? And as you can see, there are inline references that when I click it, will actually identify which paper in that list that statement was generated from. So I think I saw a comment just asking for clarification around that RAG architecture and how that works. So just to reiterate something that Fran said, the key thing to note here is that we're leveraging the large language model for its language capabilities. So it's been trained externally on broad data that then enables it to understand and to be able to generate lifelike and understandable text. But all of the knowledge, the brain that is generating that information in the research assistant is bound by the content within the Web of Science core collection. So we're using things like the article title and the abstract in order to then ask the large language model to regenerate that text. So perhaps I'll show now the next example of the type of question that a user can ask here, which is something more broad, more like a research question. So in this case, I'm going to ask something like, is language innate? So here, the same principle applies. You're asking the large language model to turn that into a search that it can then conduct down through the full depth of the Web of Science core collection. So in this case, it's used that query and turned that into a subject-based search, topic-based search of language and innateness, and it's found 1.2 million total documents. But because in this case, I've asked it to actually sort of respond to a research question, it prioritizes that content and that generated text to try and respond to the question. But again, the key thing here in the context of it being a research assistant and also our principle of sort of flipping the script using artificial intelligence is to not use this to just create a polished answer to the research question that was posed that a user might then understandably want to just copy and paste and submit as part of an uncredited piece of work. Here, we're using the large language model to actually provide that insight into the research that underpins and supports answering that particular research question. So again, if I'm interested in where this particular statement has come from, I can click on that particular article citation, and I can even see the abstract information in screen next to the generated text, so I can verify and build trust in that what was generated corresponds to the knowledge that was used to generate it. So we really are encouraging users to scrutinize and to understand the underlying research more deeply. Now, one of the key things where this starts to get, I think, even more interesting and where we can start to help users to solve problems is that we can then take what was an initial research query and then start to anticipate what else the user might want to know, or to be able to uncover other things that the Web of Science might be able to help with. So in this case, based on my question, which was, is language innate? We've actually identified that the topic related to that is around language acquisition. And we offer three current different types of visualization at this point in time that are around that understanding of a topic to help the user to dig a little bit deeper or to see a much broader view of that particular topic. So here I can extend this particular diagram up to 100 years to see how many documents in the core collection have been categorized as being on that topic of linguistics over the course of what's been published and indexed in the Web of Science core collection. So immediately a researcher exploring a new area can understand, is this something that's very new and emergent, or is this something with a deep body of research that I might want to kind of explore and go back further? I can also, sorry, just scrolling. I can also very easily see how that topic of language acquisition is related to other topics. So again, as a researcher, I can start to see, oh, if I'm interested in exploring this particular area, perhaps there are adjacent fields that I might also want to explore to understand this in its greatest depth of detail. And this is actually just is showing me a couple of things. It's not just showing me how this topic of language acquisition is related to others, but it's also telling me how much content in the Web of Science core collection there is on that topic based on the size of this node here as well. So here we can see 21,000 documents on language acquisition versus 2,000 documents on monolingualism. And all of these visualizations that I'm showing here are all interactive. So as soon as I click on that particular node there, I'm taken to that full set of results on the topic of monolingualism. And just lastly, very quickly on this particular example, I can also very quickly and easily start to get a sense of who are the key players that I might want to be aware of if I'm starting to dig a little bit deeper into this particular topic area. So in this case, we're using a combination of the quantity of papers that have been classified on that field and the impact of those papers to determine here are some researchers that you might want to be familiar with their body of work. And anybody familiar with linguistics will surely know the name Noam Chomsky. And through the connection here, we'll be able to see their researcher profile in the Web of Science to be able to get a much broader picture of their overall body of work. So as you can see, we started with a very broad research question, which we've provided some relevant research to, but we're also now helping the user to start to dig a little bit deeper and find information that they might not have otherwise been able to realize was there in the Web of Science, or would have spent a much longer amount of time distilling through and understanding and creating the equivalent types of visualization or insight. Now, lastly, because time is very limited, I'll just demonstrate that third type of question that I mentioned. So we've looked at document-based search, we've looked at that kind of research-based structured question. And lastly, we've got at the moment the ability to perform some quite complex analytics as well. So we can take the example here of which institutions published the most on COVID in the last 12 months. Now, again, this is a different type of question. We're not naturally seeking research documents in this particular field, and the research assistant anticipates that and immediately generates a visualization specific to that particular query, which is charting the different institutions that have published different quantities of research in the last 12 months on that particular topic. And you can adapt these kinds of queries in multiple different ways to explore different topics, different institutions, different researchers, and bound that by different timeframes and by different and different countries, for example. So that is a very brief introduction to the Research Assistant. I could spend a lot longer showing you some of the capabilities of it. And if you are interested in learning more, then I think we're going to be posting an additional poll around now as well, so you can register your interest to find out a little bit more and to gain access from your institution. So thank you very much. And just to round off, I'm going to invite Juan back to the conversation to offer his insights. You've kindly talked about your motivation for signing up to the Development Partner Program, and personally, I can speak to the valuable insight that you and your institution provided in testing and validating these features. But just to close off this session before we go to the Q&A, I'd love to hear your thoughts on your interactions with the Web of Science Research Assistant and perhaps some kind of insight that might be useful to other librarians and institutions that are tuning in today. Thank you.
Yeah, just briefly, my experience. I mean, it's been a positive experience because, like I said, it's more focused on actually the content. But I will say, really, the experience of being a beta tester is really important because I was able to interact with your team. I can still ask you questions. And most of all, I can point my colleagues to reach out to you and say, hey, can we test this? So I think it opens up a great opportunity with that.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Juan. And it was great to have you on board. So I think we're now going to go back to Q&A. So Fran, I'll hand it back to you to see if you can choose some of the many questions I think that we've had coming in.
Yeah, absolutely. So firstly, thank you everyone who's submitted a question. We've had over 55, so I don't know if we're going to get a chance to answer them all live, but we will do our best to pick a few that have quite a few upvotes. I'll kick off with answering one of the top upvoted questions. How is Clarivate thinking about the environmental impact of implementing AI in libraries? So yes, this is absolutely at the forefront of our minds. The conversation regarding carbon emissions that are caused by AI is part of a wider discussion that we're having within Clarivate around all of our systems, all of our data storage, our sustainability, and it can't be solved by any one organization, but we're working really, really closely with our vendors, customers, and community to understand and address this. One of the things that we've got is that we're fully committed to get to net zero carbon emissions before 2040. So we're working really closely in partnership with all of our cloud systems, our data storage providers such as Amazon, Google, and Microsoft, who have their own sustainability commitments to make sure that we get to that. And then also, obviously, now our new vendors in the space of AI. We've got an environmental management statement, which I'll post in the chat. There's a link to that as well as a sustainability report, which talks a little bit more about how we're going to get to that climate transition plan, including setting very kind of quite rigorous science-based targets around that reduction in carbon emissions. The other thing I will mention is actually this is one of the benefits of the academic AI platform. Not only is it serving as this technology backbone, enabling us to centralize, accelerate deployment of AI capabilities across our portfolio, it's also really promoting efficient performance and reduced carbon impact. And I gave the example earlier of choosing AI models. We work with different vendors. We also work with different models from the same vendor. So for example, for certain use cases, we actually chose to use GPT 3.5 rather than the newer 4.0, as it provides more high quality results without the kind of added environmental burden. So that just kind of reflects our decision-making approach. We're selecting AI models based not only on the suitability for the task at hand, which is what I mentioned earlier, but also performance, cost and sustainability. So that's been really helpful. And then the other thing is that the central platform really allows us to avoid duplication in systems, in processing, in calls, which reduces resource consumption and emissions as well. So I think that that's a really good example of how we're focusing on sustainability at Clarivate. There's a question here about I'll go to one for one actually, the top up voted one. So what role do libraries have in navigating the possible legal ramifications for sharing new researcher outputs? Have you come across this in your work at Syracuse, and is it something that you've been supporting?
So yeah, and I'm looking at that question there. So as far as the research being shared out, it really falls upon the researcher to protect that data. So it's not something that um, we necessarily can protect other than talking through the vendors, right? And making sure what privacy policies they have that ensures that their product is not training, their data is not their models are not being trained on our data. So a good example of this is we currently, as a Microsoft campus, have an agreement through our Microsoft account to where all prompts, anything that they use in Copilot, the data is not preserved. And that's part of the business side of Microsoft. They don't keep any of that data. Whereas other tools like ChatGPT, the free version, does that. So that's how we does that answer the question?
I think that's helpful. Thank you. Um, Great. And then I'll come to one for Phil as well. You mentioned that the research assistant looks at the top researchers in the field and often highlights those for understanding a topic or highlighting material in a literature review. Do you have concerns about this entrenching the systemic biases that are already present in given fields of research towards researchers of a dominant culture or institutions?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the kind of overarching principles that we've taken with the development with the research system, one of the advantages I think that was posed by the chat interface is that when we are making these sort of presentations of results or visualizations or anything that can be seen as kind of a ranking order of people, is that we can use the interface to really transparently describe how those results have been determined. So even in that example of like a top researcher, the interface will explain how that interpretation of top in that context has been determined. So because there are multiple ways to do so, and we've done testing with users around how best to align with user expectations in those kinds of cases as well. So in that particular example, there was using a combination of, as I mentioned, I believe, of the quantity of work that's classified on a particular topic and a weighting based on the number of citations in that topic as well. But there are, and again, because of the capabilities of this technology and that the flexibility of this type of UI, you can ask it specifically, and we'll continue to develop out these kinds of capabilities to ask it more specifically, okay, I want to know who's published the most on a particular topic or who is cited the most on a particular topic. So I think it's that combination of being responsible in how we're displaying those results. So you notice they're not numbered. We're not saying this is the top researcher on this particular topic area, but tiling them instead and being transparent about how those results have been generated, not just for researchers, but also for articles, I think gives the agency still to the researcher, to the user, to make an informed decision about how to interpret that information. So yes, it's something we consider very closely in the way in which we develop the product and the design of it.
Great, thanks, Phil. And there's also a question as well about using retractions or contradictions future research. Now, I want to make clear on this question that the question was about retraining the whole AI, and using the retrieval augmented generation method means that we're not training the AI, so there's not going to be some inherent built-in information in the models that's going to kind of remember that retracted content or use that research. Phil, I don't know if you've got any other further comments on that as well.
Well, what you've said is absolutely correct. The only additional piece of information is that we will be, well, across the Web of Science, we make it very clear visually in the records when a piece of work has been retracted. We're also building out that capability at the moment to be able to more clearly articulate the reason behind that retraction as well. So again, the person viewing that document can make an informed decision about how to interpret that piece of research. And that plays through into the research assistant as well. So if any retracted content appears in that set of results that are generated, it's very clearly identified as a retracted piece of research. We're exploring, again, in collaboration with users, excluding retracted content entirely from the search results, potentially in particular those that are being leveraged in order to generate the written response. But again, those are kinds of things that we take very seriously and work in collaboration with our users to make sure that we're fitting with expectations.
Great, thank you. And I'll ask this one really quickly of Juan. We've just got a minute left, I know. Do you have any suggestions for learning how to evaluate AI tools, any frameworks or metrics that you like to use?
Yes, that's a good question. I actually wanted to answer that question, which I will probably have to follow up with. I have a colleague at RIT, Jennifer Freer. She gave a great presentation at Charleston Conference in 2023 that actually had a nice framework layout. And I'm going to reach out to Jennifer and see if I can get that as well. And can I just quickly comment on one question about the comment about Wikipedia comparison? I was not necessarily comparing the two. It's just the way in which we react. And the person asked the question is, I hope this webinar will demonstrate why we need generative AI. And I just want to really put this out here that we don't need generative AI. It's here already, and students and faculty are finding their uses for it. So what we need to do is figure out how we can help them with it, because students will find it and they will use it regardless. We can't stop them. They will just use it. Just like Wikipedia, they found a way to use it and continue to use it. So we have to figure out a way to help them, or at least incorporate it. And that's why we talk to vendors on all sides of what they're developing. So I'll just kind of leave it at that.
Great. Thanks so much, Juan. And thanks everyone for answering all the questions that we had time for.
Great. Okay. Thanks so much. Yeah, I'll just say thank you to Fran, Juan, and Phil for taking the time to speak with us today. And thank you to our attendees for your questions and comments. I'd like to remind our viewers that we did record today's program, so be on the lookout for a follow-up email from Choice and ACRL with a link to the recording and where to access the slides. I'll also note that we will capture the Q&A transcript, and I think Clarivate is planning to do some sort of follow-up regarding the questions that are outstanding. And also, if you have a few minutes after the presentation to fill out a brief survey, we would really appreciate it. So thanks again to all of you out there for joining us. We hope you learned something new from the session and hope to see you again in the near future on another webinar.